Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited about this conversation. And even though you are not in journalism anymore, the world of journalism is very interesting right now. And
Yes.
what I am really curious about is what inspired you to transition from a decorated over 25-year career working at the Wall Street Journal to now coaching, and particularly coaching journalists and editors.
Well, I had been thinking about making the move from journalism to coaching for years, sort of looking at the landscape of the business of journalism. I sort of felt that I needed to have a plan B because a lot of journalistic organizations were cutting staff, and I wanted to be ready to move make a move just in case that happened to me. So my story with that is I got a actually in the beginning a health coach certification about 7 years ago, and because I had my own health journey that I had been going through, I had gained a lot of weight and took a lot of time to get all of that weight off. And so that's
Mhm.
what I felt naturally drawn to. So I got my certification. I spent a lot of nights after work, for about 8 months working on that certification and then turning around the next morning, going back into the office. So got that certification and then proceeded to sit on it for a long time. Work was going okay. I got another certification in life coaching
Mhm.
and just sort of didn't really do anything with those in terms of getting clients. I tried to keep my coaching skills as sharp as I could over that time. And then in November of 2023, I got the call that I'd been laid off
Mhm.
from the journal. And so that's always devastating news to hear that you've lost your job. And there's always a storm that goes through you. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to do next? But then it took me a couple of days to get my feet back under me and remember that I had a couple of coaching certifications under my belt. So I went, okay, maybe this is a sign that the universe is telling me that, hey, you need to do this now.
Yeah.
And so within a month, started an LLC, put my shingle out there for the world to see, and luckily got my first client within about 4 or 5 weeks,
Wow.
which it was and am internally grateful for. Yeah.
Yeah. What drew you to journalism originally?
Well, I my grandmother and my mother would get the morning paper every every morning. And it shows you how old I am.
Yeah. I
And
remember
yeah,
that.
right. And I would just, as a little kid, maybe about 10 years old, just go out in the morning, get the paper. And of course, being a little boy, I would always read the sports section first
Mhm.
and then read the local section, just really got a sense of the world that was bigger than my little hometown in Virginia that only had 3,000 people. And so I really wanted to explore that more. My first merit badge in Boy Scouts was in journalism.
How cool is that?
Yeah, yeah, and I remember my small town had and still has a weekly newspaper,
Mhm.
and so I would go down to the office a few times over a month, and the editor of the paper would sit there with me, and we would go over how to write a story, how to write a headline, how to actually do a page layout.
Mhm.
And so my final project for the merit badge was designing a front page for a newspaper.
Wow.
Yeah, with all the graphics, with all the stories and everything. And it really took hold from there. In high school, I was on the newspaper staff for the 5 years I was there. Our school was 8 through 12, so wrote for the newspaper for 2 years, took photos as well. So had some dark room experience from back then. And then when I was in the 11th grade, I became the paper's editor. So it was my job to sort of rally our small core of troops to go out and find stories and write stories, and be my responsibility to put those stories together for our 4 page newspaper every month or so. So
Yeah.
that was a great experience. I was also getting experience working, actually going to a workshop at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond,
Hmm.
and spent 2 weeks at VCU. That was my first time I'd ever been on a college campus.
Yeah.
And we would go to the the newsroom of the Richmond Times Dispatch. And my first time going to like a big city daily newsroom.
Yeah.
It was really exciting to see everybody buzzing around on their phone, on their computers, typing out stories. And I think the thing that really cemented journalism for me was that doing that experience and being able to see Associated Press wire stories literally coming off the printer from Germany and from Brazil and from Japan. And I thought, how cool is this? This is like something I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it really grew from there, graduated from BCU in journalism, and had in that time had a great internship at the Wall Street Journal
Hmm.
as an editor for them, and wrote, and really it was a great learning experience for me, just doing that internship and being at a place that I never imagined being at as a kid, as a young journalist. And so it was summer of getting used to that and really taking part in high stakes journalism, as it were, and also spending 2 weeks in New York City. I'd never been to New York City at that time, so I
Yeah.
got it was it was a whirlwind experience for someone who grew up in a small town with only two traffic lights.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's like you're like out of central casting and a story out of central for a small town kid makes it in New York.
yeah.
That's great. And the amount of change you must have seen, I mean, obviously from when you were a little kid, but really your professional career starting in college to the time that you transitioned, what has happened to journalism? And that's a big question, I guess, over the past few decades, but especially I think with the dawn of the internet. I feel like that was probably a changing point. And how did you see your career shifting? And what did you see? I'm not sure the right way to ask this, but what did you see journalists who entered their career prior to these changes, what they were experiencing?
Yeah. Well, when I started at the journal was still an all black and white paper.
Mhm.
It, the front page of the journal, the design of it hadn't changed in decades. So there was that. And at the same time, the journal was one of the first papers to go onto the internet, and also to charge a subscription from the beginning.
Mhm.
You have a lot of papers and organizations that in the past few years have started doing that, but the journal was the first one, which was a really smart move on the
Very.
part. And so we were at the forefront of being on the internet, charging a price for it because we had a premium product that people wanted. And so there was still the paper itself at that time was still dictating the rhythms of what the web version, the .com version was doing. Papers have deadlines that they have to meet for making the delivery trucks, and in the case of the journal, delivery planes to get the paper to far out places. And so there was still the bones of the journal, especially at that time, were still basically print. Paper finished its first edition sort of middle of the evening and would continually update through the night. And I think you started seeing a shift two in the early 2000s. I was lucky enough to go over to Brussels, Belgium, and work on the Wall Street Journal Europe on their main news desk there. And over there, the European journal's already in color. It had a bit of a bolder design to it. And you could tell that the .com, there was a bit more .com influence that was in the European paper and starting to come over to the American journal as well, in terms of just what is this internet thing? What's Google? What This is the time of the big AOL Time Warner deal as well. So and the .com boom and the .com
That's
bust.
right. I
Yeah,
forgot about that
yeah,
AOL Warner deal. Wow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and funny enough, before I went to Brussels, I was a copy editor for the front page of the journal where a lot of the big stories were being broken. I can remember it felt like every Sunday evening there was a big merger merger story breaking that involved some up and coming .com company and some old school media company. It was a really interesting, powerful time. But when the .com bust hit, I think the bottom fell out, and I think a lot of people were a little more risk averse about getting into .com,
Mhm.
to that arena.
I started college in 2001 as a journalism major,
Oh, wow.
and 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
And what you were just saying, along with that change, I think
Mhm.
I mean, there was so much going on in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
It's such a busy time,
Mhm.
generally, but also for that industry in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. And so going back, one of the things that I think really hurt, not necessarily the journal in particular, but I think newspapers in general, was at that time, 2008, in the financial crisis, the ubiquity of, say, Craigslist, for example,
Hmm.
and in things like that really hurt the advertising aspect of the business of journalism. And it was really hard to for a lot of papers to recover from that. The journal had the foresight to charge a subscription for the .com product from the beginning. And I think that's what helped the journal survive the financial crisis. And because, like a lot of papers nowadays, it's the actual paper itself is very thin.
Hmm.
It does it Papers still have a lot of trouble getting advertising in. And I remember back in the day, because I lived in Jersey City, New Jersey, before moving to Brussels. And on Saturday nights, I would go out and buy what they call the Bulldog edition of the New York Times, the big, thick version of the Times that had some news from Saturday afternoon, but basically papers are making so much money they could actually do that.
Yeah.
And so in nowadays, you've got so many papers fighting for survival, some of them going to 3 days a week, some of them going completely online. And
Mhm.
so it's a very tough time in the business because how journalism companies are scrambling to figure out how to reach readers now.
Mhm.
Still trying to do that. One of the things that the journal was very smart in doing was having its own video platform where, and the last, say, about 15 or so years that I was at the journal, I was with the video team.
Mhm.
And so we had the journal had a robust video department. And first few years that I was there, we actually had 6 live shows a day that we were streaming on the internet. Yeah,
Wow.
it was
Wow.
very busy. We had news programs from 8:30 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. So it's, and the journal's video strategy has shifted to more to no live shows, but still being on the news, as we like to say, where if there's a breaking news story, the journal's video team will get out a news video package for that and then have an explainer talking about what's going on behind the scenes of a particular story. And the journal's video team has been very robust. The journal has people all over the world that they can pluck from, not just videographers and producers, but the entire reporting staff of the journal. They can pluck from, put them in front of a camera and have them discuss and give some analysis on whatever news piece that they're working on. Yeah.
And it's as you're saying all of this, I actually wrote something down from your website of deadlines, donuts, and burnout.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the question that I had was, what for journalists and editors specifically, what are some of the biggest challenges shifting into a new career? I mean, it seems like I'm kind of stressed hearing what you did. It seems like a really intense schedule,
Yeah.
and I can imagine there is a lot of burnout. And so, what are some of those specific things, or I should say, those specific challenges that journalists and editors face as they transition either into a new role within the industry or into a different industry altogether?
It's wow. One thing is understanding that the skills that they have been building over the years as a journalist, they can be used in different places. And it just takes a mindset shift, working on that mindset to make that happen. I mean, it's rethinking how a journalist sees themselves, as opposed journalists see themselves as journalists generally, but so it's about making this shift from that to I do journalism. And so you don't attach your being to that particular job. It doesn't mean that you don't like the job any less or
Right.
didn't have any meaning, but sometimes we put so much of ourselves into what we do that when that thing goes away, we go away with it.
Yeah.
And I want to help people understand that yes, maybe your role went away, or maybe you decided to leave that role, but you're still you. You still have your hobbies, you still have your skills. And so let's take a look at your skills in particular. And let's think about and consider where else might you want to use those skills, and
Yeah.
have people understand, and have those journalists understand that you have more demand as a former journalist than you may think, because how to write, how to edit, and how to tell a good story. And so while there's you may not have access to that foxhole that you had in the newsroom, everything that you've accumulated, somebody out there wants. Somebody out there is really looking for somebody who understands how to tell a story, and how, like, if you're running, say, a food website, and they need somebody to be able to convey the story of the history of a particular cake, for
Mhm.
example, your ability to tell a story will enhance that story of how that cake came to be.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
things of that nature. Yeah.
And two things on that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's the same way in New York. I know it's the same way in New York. I've spent most of my adult life in DC, and the first thing out of people's mouths, what do you do? I mean,
Yeah.
it's something when I moved out of the DC region, it, it's something that I had to break
Yeah.
asking. That's the first thing I would ask people. Oh, so what do you do? And
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
why the
Yeah.
podcast is what it is. Oh, what do you do again? Like
Mm-hmm.
what?
Yeah.
And so much of our identity, especially depending on where you live, is tied to your career and tied to your profession. And I know I went through that, and I take great pride in what I do, and it means a
Exactly.
lot to me.
Yeah.
But there is a separation that I know I had to learn, that that isn't the only thing that I do. And that mindset shift that you're talking about can be a really difficult one of, well, if I'm not a journalist, what am I? Or if I am a journalist, but in a different way, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you work with your clients to find work that works? I think what you said on your website is work that works for them.
Works for
Like, how
them.
do you kind of get them to that point? I'm sure when people are coming to you, identifying that mindset shift is a big piece, but then where do you go from there?
We talk about what they used to do,
Hmm.
and we really look at the skills that they've developed
Hmm.
over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however long. And then we start thinking about, okay, you have this ability to write funny stories about what's been happening in a neighborhood, for example. So how can we still use your journalistic skills, your ability to ask great questions, to to use that in a way that helps shape a story for, like, a shopping website or an auto website. And again, it's separating out who they are from what they do. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's, as I said earlier, it's, you do journalism, right? You do writing. It's the journalism part that you have is not going to leave you.
Right.
It's not. It helps shape your worldview. It helps shapes your career. We're not putting that to the side at all. We're enhancing that, and we're making sure that the people that you go in front of for job interviews understand that yes, you're a journalist with a highly decorated career, and you have the ability to tell a story that will entice people and move people to buy a product or investigate that more. And so trying to make that, let's say, fun,
Hmm.
but a little bit easier
Yeah.
for them so that they get to do the storytelling aspect that they've been doing for years, but in a very different way.
Mhm.
And understand and also helping them understand that while that part of your life as a working journalist may be over or in hibernation, it still informs how you do everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how you said in hibernation. That's great. And some of the roadblocks that you talked about are that mindset, really digging into all your different skills and identifying what those are. Are there any other roadblocks that people face, especially as someone who might be mid-career or like I can kind of see the end in terms of retirement much more so than when I started my career. Are there any roadblocks that you find your clients come to you with that are fairly consistent?
It's I think there's a certain camaraderie
Hmm.
that comes with being in journalism and being in newsrooms and having to cover breaking stories, and you gather you build a sense of community like in a newsroom.
Hmm.
And so the question becomes, how do you continue to build that community in another place? And again, those community building skills that you've been cultivating over the past 15, 20 years, however long, that you might not have been realizing that you were doing. Let's try to transfer those over to your new position or the positions that you're going at, and and showing people that you can how to build teams, how to
Yeah.
build camaraderie, and how to be a leader, even if you don't have the title. How to rally troops, how to connect and communicate with people. All those things, again, those quote unquote soft skills
Right.
aren't really soft at all. They're crucial and they're critical. And those come along with you too.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, when you leave, you have to leave your key card at the desk,
Right.
but you don't leave your journalistic skills at the desk and you
Right.
don't leave your soft skills at the desk.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So those are yours. And it's the communication piece is so critical. In every field, in every industry, communication is such a superpower. And a friend and I were talking about this the other day.
Mhm.
He commented on something that he admired about me, and I was like, oh. And it started the conversation of there's so many things that we just do. Like you said, you may not have
Right.
the title,
Mhm.
but how to build a team, how to investigate, how to do XYZ.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's hard to take a step back from yourself and see those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So I love what you said about
Mhm.
you might leave the key card, but all of those things are coming with you
Yeah.
and identifying what does it mean to be a journalist or XYZ, who
Mhm.
whatever your industry is. That's a really great way to approach it. And have you seen any interesting career paths for any of your clients, like moving from a journalist to a baker or something like that?
I've seen journalists I've worked with go on and not necessarily be a baker, but they're still writing and they're
Yeah.
still creating in different places, like creating their own podcasts, creating their own blogs, working with nonprofits on the communication side.
Yeah.
So those and they're happy. They're happy doing those things because they get a sense of fulfillment from their new ventures that they got from their old venture.
Yeah.
I think I think with journalism there's a sense of fulfillment that comes when it comes with putting a story out there and broadening someone's knowledge.
Mhm.
And that same fulfillment, again, that same sense, same ability to get that fulfillment also can also go to a nonprofit or go to a podcast.
Yeah.
And it's it's something that I think resonates deeply with people and resonate deeply with the former journalist who's doing who's still doing good work, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And uh, you were made for this because what you're also talking about is curiosity, and your curiosity and your ability to allow a story to unfold
Mhm.
versus trying to, in this case, give advice, really working with someone to let
Mhm.
it unfold for them and guiding them through it. Just right there, those skills, you may not think journalist and life coach or career coach, but it's right there. And
He's right
that
there.
right there, and that curiosity that journalists have and how they are trained to perceive the world and to approach the world is such a skill, I think, in higher demand, even more than communication, frankly, because we think very linearly, and media literacy. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine how much of a skill set that is in demand right now.
Right.
The more I learn about media literacy, the more I realize I'm like, oh, I don't have it. It's not something I really learned. And it might be my age, I don't know, but really, all of that is so desirable in the workforce and in different fields. Have you seen any of your journalists going into, I know you mentioned podcasts, but social media? Like, I will admit, I am chronically online, and I is talking about media literacy. I get a lot of info from TikTok that I try and verify. And sometimes I feel like I'm living in two different universes. It's like what I'm getting immediately has it, like the mainstream news catches up 2 or 3 days later.
Mm-hmm.
And I try and follow people who had a more traditional career. I feel like that's a little bit more reliable in a way.
Okay.
And
Sure. Sure.
but what are your thoughts on that? Or have you had any clients that have sort of moved into the social media space? And is it healthy for
Mm.
us? I don't think it's healthy for us. I don't think it's
It,
good.
well, I haven't had any my clients moved into
Mhm.
that. Is it healthy? No. No.
Is that why I'm crashing out every 2 to 3 days? Is that
It,
could be?
it it's you see snippets of stories on
Mhm.
social media. You might see a 15 or 30-second video in TikTok or Instagram,
Right.
but you really don't get a sense of how that story came together.
Mhm.
And another thing about social media is, particularly with the algorithm, and if you tell the algorithm that I'm watching, say, local news in Florida, for
Mhm.
example, that's what it will give you.
Right.
And the thing, as old a technology as newspapers are, the great thing is you pick up a newspaper and you're going to see a story that you never would have seen before. Maybe some interesting thing going on in France, for example, or in Kenya. And in reading that story, maybe it only takes you a couple minutes. It just expands your mind just a little bit, just a
Yeah.
little bit. And with social media, sometimes, and we just talked about this, you can stay in your lane
Yeah.
if you're not careful,
Yeah.
and so that's where curiosity comes in and sort of
Yeah.
breaking down that cycle, breaking down that doom scrolling and seeing, okay, okay, there's some interesting story going on about bicycles in Rwanda. It's coming to mind because the world championships are in Rwanda this year. So so you stop there and like, huh, okay. So what's going on in Rwanda? What's the World Championships about? And then you pull off the highway
Mhm.
and you go to that exit, and then you read a little bit more about how cycling crazy Rwanda is. And chances are you might not have found that out if it stayed on the interstate like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it takes curiosity to it takes doesn't just take curiosity, it takes a little bit of courage.
yeah,
Go out of your comfort zone just a little bit and find out about this thing that is interesting, that looks interesting and looks and is a bit off the beaten path.
yeah.
And again, sort of reading about stories like that, sort of like travel. Once you travel to a place, your mind doesn't go back to its original shape.
Yeah. And it also gets us out of only things are happening in our country or in our little space of the world, wherever that is.
Yeah.
I travel a lot for work, and one of the things I love is, and I do love TikTok, it changes depending on where I am. And I'm like, oh, look what Kansas City likes. This is
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
fun. But in terms of the news and social media, it's almost as if someone was just like running by your house and was like, there's a fire. And you're like, what? There's a
Yep.
fire? And then
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes later, it's like, the fire's expanded. And you're like, oh no. And
Yeah.
you're getting all these little bits without the larger context. And
Exactly.
and it works for the algorithm because then you're like, wait, what's happening? I need to find out what's happening with the
Mhm.
fire. And it in some ways can be useful, but I also I saw a therapist on TikTok say, let me give you a free piece of advice. Are you gaining any more information as you're doom scrolling? And I was like, whoop, that's my cue. Like, let's turn
Yep.
this off.
Mhm.
And it really, when you are sitting down to read an article or listen to a well-researched podcast, you are getting all of that. So cycling of Rwanda, you're getting context about the history and who's competing there and why is it there now and all of these different aspects that as fun as it is to see things on social media and sometimes interact with it in real time, you just aren't getting. And I think it's kind of dangerous, frankly. I mean, you're making and you are putting your own assumptions onto
Yeah.
those situations.
Yes.
So, given that that's part of where we are, at least I'm assuming in our society, maybe in other parts of the world as well. What advice would you have for new journalists and young journalists going into the field now?
Wow. Oh, wow.
Don't do it. No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
no, no, no.
No.
No, no. We need journalists. We
Yes,
still
we do.
need it's get as much varied experience as you can.
Yeah.
There are I got lucky going from an internship at the journal to actually working at the journal.
Mhm.
It it sounds unsexy as anything, but
Mhm.
covering local news, covering what's going on in your town or in your county is a great education in how government works, how politics work. It's a great learning ground to do that. And I would, it's like I said, it's not necessarily exciting, and the pay is not going to be that great, but you're going to learn a lot, a lot. You're going to cover police, you'll cover fire, you'll cover the local science fair at the high school, you'll cover the football game. Getting that breadth of experience
Mhm.
is going to help you be more curious, is going to help you ask more questions, and it will help you step up when the day comes when you feel like you're ready to go to the Washington Post, go to the New York Times, go to the Journal. Getting that, I really believe that getting that broad range of experience in reporting is going to help you understand people. You understand different people, you understand different cultures rather than just being siloed into starting out covering, I don't know, starting out and covering something big,
Yeah.
yeah, doing a big beat and not really having a lot of other experience
Yeah.
help that will help inform you in that beat. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that is such a great piece of advice to people who are starting their careers in general. I started my career in college admissions, and I have to say, I know it sounds crazy. Like three-quarters of what I learned and still use today, I learned as a 22 and 23-year-old. Like,
Yeah.
and things that you wouldn't expect, like we were on the road all the time and how to manage your time. And when the world moved virtually, I felt totally prepared because I was like, yeah, I did this all the time when I was on the road. And
Mhm.
just little things like that and problem solving and why they let 22 and 23-year-olds like go and do this work is beyond me, but it works. It still does work. The pay isn't great, but the skill set that I learned in particular I still use today. And I think that's really great advice. And when you take the example of politics, if you're starting to cover big stories in the political world,
Mhm.
all politics is local. I mean, it really is. And
Absolutely.
some of the like
Absolutely.
really spicy stories are local stories, like
Yeah.
a
City. Yeah.
mayor embezzling money and all of this different thing, or
Right.
positive stories of how things actually get done in a positive way for a
Mhm.
community. And so I think that's fantastic advice that again can be applied to multiple fields. And I think that's great. So personal question, do you do anything with the health certification?
I don't at the moment.
Mhm.
I'm hoping in the next year or two to sort of broaden my offerings out so
Cool.
I can do that because I know how important good health is
Mhm.
and really investing in your health. It really goes along with your career, I think, where if you're tired all the time, you're eating those donuts
Mhm.
it, and you're not getting exercise, you're sitting for hours on end. That's just as bad as being in a job that you hate.
Yeah.
And so it all really comes together
Mhm.
and really connects together. And so my own health journey, I was like 40 pounds overweight
Mhm.
and worked with a nutrition coach
Mhm.
to get my body back into shape and really start thinking about food differently
Mhm.
now. And so as a consequence of that, I do things like I'm a runner, I'm a hiker, I'm a cyclist, and that health component really helps shape other parts of my life. It and having that well-being helps me show up to my coaching better, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy those activities like as a kid or prior to working with the coach, or is that something that you found with your nutrition coach?
It was actually years after working with my nutrition
Oh,
coach
okay.
and sort of stumbled into running and never did not was not didn't play sports in high school.
Okay.
And so it's it's like in with running, it's like you do a 5K, you finish, you do your first 5K, you finish, feel great, and then you're like, okay, I think I want to do this again.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like and that's how they hook you in. Like
Yeah. Yep. Totally.
5K, do a 5K. Hey, why not do a 10K?
Yeah.
Hey, okay, did a 10K, do a half marathon. And hey, why not spend 4 months of your life training for a marathon?
Why not?
Why not? So I've only done that once, and
Okay.
but it was a great experience, and it again it really helped shape where I am
Yeah.
as a coach, and And as a coach, being in health or in career, I want to try to model good behavior for the people I work with. So yeah, I talk a lot about showing up well. And
Yeah.
that again, running and cycling and hiking help me show up better.
That's great. Yeah, I run and I always laugh because I grew up playing team sports and running was always a punishment. And
Okay.
then I started running when I moved because I needed to meet people.
Right.
And now I will admit, after 7 years, I am a runner. I used to be like, I'm not really a runner, but I am. And it not only is addictive in the sense of seeing, well, can I run a little faster? Like, could I do another mile? Like, could I,
Mhm.
that sort of piece. But it also adjusts with you where I need to walk. That's fine. I'm getting the miles in and it doesn't matter. But the piece that has really impacted my professional life is not only that adjustment of not every run's the same. You don't feel the same every day, but you're going to get the end result done in terms of the mileage.
Mhm.
But I run in the mornings and to be able, and I run with other people, and it is so almost it's therapeutic in a way. And by starting my day at least doing something hard, the rest of the day feels very easy.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel that way too. I've become a coach, my schedule has changed. So
sure.
I can slip out and run in the afternoon now.
Yeah,
Where beforehand I would have to get up in the morning. And it's just like, okay, if I can make it through 3 or 4 miles,
yeah,
I can make it through today.
yeah.
I can make it through whatever comes up in the newsroom. And
And
so
then and now when you go out during the day, are you like, oh, this is what people were doing? Do you
exactly.
ever-
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I wouldn't say it's like plain hooky or
Yeah.
anything, but it's just fun to be able to do that and really enjoy it.
Yeah, you have that control over your schedule. That's great. And is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention or anything I missed?
I don't think so.
Oh,
No, I don't think so. I just want to say that transitions are hard
yeah.
and having a team alongside you helps make that transition a little bit easier. I mean, I was fortunate when I got laid off to have good close friends give me support. And
Mhm.
in the networking that I started doing, and as an introvert, that's not easy. And, but it opened up a whole new world for me. And I had more people come alongside me and give me advice and give me insights into running a business
Mhm.
that I never considered before. The I'm grateful for the people who took the time to give me support, even from just having a cup of coffee with me to inviting me to their house for the weekend
Mhm.
just to get away. And this whole experience has really reinforced for me that can't do big changes alone. Having support, having a team, having a board of directors, personal board of directors, whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it,
Yeah.
it helps you get outside of yourself a little bit and helps you see things that you would not have seen otherwise.
And can you speak at all about, you mentioned you were an introvert.
Mhm.
Can you? I'm not. I could talk to the wall. My sister's an introvert and she always laughs. She's like, the reason I have friends is because they're extroverts that like picked me up. Like they're extroverts are just
Mhm.
like, come on, which has its challenges in a different way. But as an introvert and networking, even if it's not looking for a job, but just networking, do you
Mhm.
have any advice or anything that works for you that helps you feel more comfortable doing that?
I would keep in mind that it's not necessarily just being in a big room with people that you don't know.
Right.
That's sort of the thing. I have found for me is that just having individual conversations with interesting people
Mhm.
helps out a lot. And follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up.
Yeah.
Send them in. Send. I went to a conference in October, the first conference I'd ever been to like this. It was a leadership conference.
Mhm.
And the energy in that room was great that weekend. And getting out, that was outside of my comfort zone. And it gave me the opportunity to meet different people, to to foster friendships with people. And those are people that I'm still in contact with. So, I mean, my advice is think about the individual conversations that you have with people and nurture those and foster those. And also, as an introvert, if you do a conference like that, it's okay to rest. It's okay to chill out in your room at night
Mhm.
with it when everybody's might be downstairs at the bar. It's like it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Don't let the extroverts bully you into doing something
Right.
you don't want to do.
Exactly.
And I will say, even as an extrovert, like I take bathroom breaks just to,
Mm-hmm.
just take a
Uh-huh. Yep.
minute, just
Yep.
take a breather. I think that's excellent advice to think about it individually and not necessarily the overwhelm of the whole. So, what advice would you give to your younger self,
Oh wow. Okay. Huh.
Mr. Boy Scout?
Mr. Boy Scout. I would probably tell my younger self to be courageous. And that courage doesn't necessarily mean racing into burning buildings, but don't be afraid to make a courageous move like going overseas and living overseas for 3 years or or like spending 10 weeks in Manhattan for the summer and be be courageous, be determined, and don't be afraid to play the long game. I'm planning on being on this earth for many decades to come. And so thinking that don't take every loss personally.
Yeah.
Don't, yeah, don't, it's like, yeah, you may have lost a job, but keep, remember what you've done over that time and remember the friendships you made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And what do you love most about this work that you're doing now?
Having an impact on people's lives and being helping them transform themselves. It's like there are a lot of times when we want to make a major change, we don't know how to do it,
Mhm.
don't know who to reach out to, but then somebody comes alongside us, a mentor, a friend, and they give us support and they sort of show us that we can do these things. And then and then you see yourself change and shift. And I think a lot of times we're afraid to change because change is hard. It's like really hard. But when we do, it's like, wow, okay, I can actually do this thing.
Yeah,
And that helps build confidence. When you see yourself changing and transforming for the good, it's confidence built. And and it's something that you want to keep going, keep moving on.
that's pretty magical. And again, just as someone who has just met you, you have been impacting lives very directly throughout your career. The work that you did in journalism directly impacted how people saw the world and the information, and now you get to see it firsthand. And maybe you didn't see it
Yeah.
directly before, and now you're doing that. It's beautiful. Again, this like through line of all these skills that you have and what you're able to do. So if people are listening to this and are like, I love what Richard is doing. I would love to find him and work with him. How can people find you?
They can find me at www.richardtaliaferro.com. That's spelled Taliaferro, as you can see there
Mhm.
on the screen. And there they will see my website, my blog. I have a short podcast that I produce every week. I have a weekly newsletter that goes out as well. And if they're feeling moved enough to want to make some transformation in their lives, you can schedule a call with me on my website, and I would love to talk to you.
That's great. And we'll have all your information in the show notes and on the website. And this has just been a wonderful conversation. And thank you for the work that you're doing and that you've done. It's exciting to see a career coach specifically in journalism. I have never seen that before. So I know that you can do everyone, but it's such a nice niche that you have that you're able to help people. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time.